All right, I have 6 o'clock, so out of respect for everyone who took time out of their evening to come here and join us tonight, I'm going to jump right in. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kelly Zimmerman, Superintendent of Schools. Thank you for joining us in what is now our 3rd Community Information Forum on plans for our next capital improvement project. This project is slated to go for vote not until October, so until that point we are just continuing to give our community opportunities to come and join us in information gathering sessions. There will be an opportunity at the end of this brief presentation tonight to either ask questions, express concerns, any other comments that might be on your mind that we will try to curate into a frequently asked questions document that will then be on that blank page for those of you who took one of those brochures coming in. There's an empty page at the end to start curating some commonly asked questions. So with that, we'll jump right in. We always start by grounding in the vision and mission of our district. The vision and mission of our district has not changed a whole lot over the past 3 years. What does change are the goals and the actions in which we take to realize our district's vision and mission. I've highlighted some key words, and the reason I've done that is because all decision-making in the district, whether it is related to a building project, whether it's related to curriculum, whether it's related to professional development for our teachers, always aligns with where we are headed and what our commitment as a district is. We are committed to providing a wide range of academic and extracurricular opportunities for all of our students at Delaware Academy. We are committed to providing a wide range of career pathways, and we are prepared to committing and preparing our students to enter a world with confidence, with altruism, with adaptability. And so these are themes that you should be looking for even as we're planning our next capital project. So by the end of tonight's presentation, we hope you have an understanding of the goals of the overall project, an understanding of where we are right now and where we are headed in the planning for this. We'll do a brief review again of project financing and how we can actually complete this project with 0 new taxes, being responsible to our taxpayers. We have some updates on the overall timeline, and then of course, as I promised, opportunity at the end for community questions and further input. I'm not going to read through this whole slide, but this is just to demonstrate to you. The New York State Education Department requires that when districts go out for capital projects, that we notify taxpayers 45 days prior to a vote of our intention to go out for a capital project, of the size and the scope and what we're asking for. Here, we believe that that's not enough time for our community to reach all of our community members, for our community members to understand what it is that we're planning and have opportunity to ask questions. So we started planning back in October. By the time we come to vote again this October, we will have been engaging our community for a full year. Now this has looked at a number of different ways. We started with our first project forum back in November. In almost every board meeting since then, there's been some degree of discussion on this capital project. We had our most recent capital project forum just before the end of the school year, and then here we are as promised in the summer. We will have one more of these open meetings prior to the vote in October. That will take place likely end of September, first week of October. So as the board and I sat down to look at overall goals for this particular project, we remained committed to putting forth a project that solved a number of challenges we are currently facing, but all without putting any additional burden on our taxpayers for that project. And I'll explain in a bit how we're able to do exactly that. I mentioned being aligned with our district goals, always looking through the eyes of what are our current full set of needs, instructionally and otherwise, with a focus on safety and security, and not just the required maintenance of our facilities, but improving our facilities that move us ahead with our goals as we look toward the future. When we think about students who are moving in, this past year we probably had we looked at 80 students coming in and out of our district at one point or another across all grade levels. And so when families are looking to come to this region, we want to be the district that they choose. So when we're thinking about the improvements and what we're prioritizing, how do we ensure that we become the choice, that we become that destination destination district when families are deciding the very best schools to send their children to. And then, of course, we want to be responsive to community input and feedback. So this scope has not changed significantly since the last time the board visited to decide on what needed to be next. How do we decide what goes into a project? As many of you may know, we just are in the process of closing out the most recent project. So there are a number of different factors that we consider when we're putting together a new scope. We have to consider a building condition survey and annual visual inspections. These are requirements from New York State that take a look at the end of life for a number of different items throughout the district to help prioritize minimally what do we need to get done. We look at any items that perhaps didn't really hit that list at the last project, but now we're approaching that and we need to look at now. Any new items that may have popped up since then, and then alignment again with our district goals and future planning. The project we just closed out, we did significant improvements at the elementary school. So that's why the elementary list on this particular project is not quite as expansive as in our middle high school and in district-wide or transportation garage. The line items in this particular project that are probably the most significant include the construction of a new agriculture and technology innovation lab, include updates to our physical education and athletic facilities, and also include some updates right here in the room where you're sitting for instruction in music and in the arts. So rather than jump into every single detail of all of these, I'm just going to highlight those ones that I just mentioned. So when we look at our new New York State standards that have come out, when we look at what we are preparing our students for as evidenced by their requests on career surveys, as we look into what majors they're entering when they leave us, or the numbers of students who are actually going right into the workforce, into technical fields, we have to kind of work backwards and say, does our current curriculum support and truly prepare students for what they will be entering, whether they enter the workforce, careers, military, or college after they leave Delaware Academy? And when we stood back and asked ourselves that question, we discovered that compared to our neighbors, we're lacking pretty significantly in our technology and agriculture areas. We are a school that prides ourselves on our agricultural history. So when we thought about how can we update that to ensure our students are ready, we wanted to land in a project that will preserve the agricultural instruction, agricultural pieces of our curriculum, but also that really highlights more of the STEM pathways. STEM meaning science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And when we went to visit a few different schools, we quickly discovered the importance of designing a destination space where students can engage in project-based and cross-curricular learning. One that includes not just your traditional metal and woodworking labs, those are important, but how do we instruct students on the design process? How do we get our students to be 21st century learners where they're thinking design-minded, where they're collaborating with one another to come up with different projects? So we knew that we needed to include a design and fabrication space where students can engage in that type of thinking, where they can be introduced to computer software that moves them to that design area, but then those computers have the ability to actually talk to the machinery that's in the lab. So our students are still doing the woodworking. They're still doing the welding, but they're doing that with updated and state-of-the-art equipment as we're preparing them for those pre-engineering fields, pre-architecture, and coursework. Working with Highland Associates, they have done a bit of a rendering here for us to give us an idea of what this space could look like. Now keep in mind, this is where our current technology wing sits. This is no construction to the outside of the building. This is all using the existing footprint. Walking in right here, toward that left is where our greenhouse currently sits, or I should say kind of our makeshift greenhouse space. You can see the furniture in here is intentionally designed this way so students can collaborate with one another, where a teacher becomes a facilitator of learning. And then as we move back into that space, you see updated welding labs there on the left. We have windows installed so that teachers in either space can see other students and other teachers as they're working. And then right as we turn the corner here, you'll see that space where's the prefabrication, where all of the ideas take place, where that first is started. Whiteboards, floor to ceiling, where students can just get on and just kind of jot their ideas down and then bring them to life in this space. The goal is for this to be a destination space where even students from our elementary school can come down and engage in this learning space. There's still more comes through here. I want to get to the very end so you can see it. Here we go. So right now, when you walk into where this currently, does anyone know where you walk when you come to vote on the school budget? That part of the building there. You walk in and look left and you see just a kind of a blank wall right now. It has the big FFA emblem on it. So that wall here will be opened up. And then this becomes a space where students walking by can see what's happening in here. And this is a space where students want to be and they want to engage. Moving on to upgrades in this space where we're currently sitting. We want our students to have access to industry standard lighting, soundboards, again, opportunity for not only our musical productions, but also instruction in this space. And then moving on to physical education and athletics. We are proposing out here on the 2 current existing fields that we update those spaces on an existing footprint. Again, not looking to expand what is currently out there. Down on the lower field, we are proposing that the installation of a dual-purpose softball field that can also double as a soccer practice field primarily, because this skinned dirt infield will overlap with some of the soccer field in there. I have been to other districts where they actually use that to play games on as well. But for our purposes, the vision is for that to serve as both softball and a soccer field. And then and that will be dirt and sand and grass outfield there. On Dave Kelly Field, we are proposing synthetic turf on this field, as everybody is well aware of. And the reason for that primarily is to expand opportunities. Since COVID, the number of hours that our students are out on those fields, whether it be on our tennis courts or either of those fields, engaging in outdoor instruction, has increased almost exponentially. So capitalizing on expanding physical education, other instruction, outdoor learning spaces, this lens on equity, too, is huge for us. Especially over this last year, we've really taken a hard look at how do we provide equitable experiences for both our girls and our boys, whether it's instruction or in athletic contests. One example of our progress toward that is in our main gym in here. This summer, when we redid the floors in our main gym, we repainted and resurrected the old volleyball courts that were in there, so that our girls' volleyball team can also have the ability to play in that main gym again, so it's no longer just basketball. Here, the view is to have a field that can handle extended hours of use, so that our girls' soccer team, varsity soccer teams, JV soccer teams can have an opportunity to have starting games on this space. We are proposing addition of lights on there as well to extend the playability and the time, so they can have the premier experience that our football team has enjoyed through these years. So it's that lens on equity and for all ages. This also gives us an opportunity, because there would not be as much of the wear and tear, opportunity for all of our youth leagues throughout our community to access the field as well. So we really have an eye on the equity component, but also on community use. Another example I can think of a step that the district just took was on our brand new tennis courts. We painted pickleball lines this year because that is a request from the community to come and use that space. And we really want this campus to be open to our community, to see people up here and using our facilities. So I think I just hit on a bunch of these. But an important piece is, I'm very aware of the history of concerns related to synthetic fuels. And we've listened to that, and we've done our research on the actual composite materials. The synthetic grass that we are looking at using for the carpet on here is from a company called Field Turf, that's why it's capitalized there. And one of the most recent testing results for PFAs in that showed that it did not hit levels that represent human health risks based on extensive testing for PFAs. We're also looking at underneath, instead of using recycled crumb rubber from recycled tires, using what's called in the market as a virgin rubber or EPDM, which does come from more natural sources and mitigates some of that concern as well. So with an eye on environmental awareness, health and safety are those more specific projects or products that we're looking at here. As we move into the financial planning, in previous presentations, we spent a lot of time talking about detail of good financial planning and capital projects and what the pieces are that go into that. We've worked hard not just in capital project planning, but as we develop our budget year over year, to ensure that we're engaging in cycles of projects that maintain long-term stability and viability for our district. We are intentional in consulting with fiscal advisors so that we make decisions on funding sources so that we are prepared to, we know what size projects we can do, we know what cycle those can be on, in order to always stay at that 0% impact, so we're not asking our taxpayers for extra taxes to cover these types of projects. And when that's planned correctly, it certainly can result in long-term sustainability to our facilities for years to come. So how exactly do we do that? In New York State, our district is 73.3% aided from New York State Building Aid, which means that we get 73.3% back on the total amount for that project over the course of the years in which that project is financed. So it's not one lump sum all of a sudden, but it comes over a course of years. We also apply a certain percentage of our debt reserve, which comes out of our reserve planning year over year. And then we maintain a certain level of annual debt and maintenance with interest. When we look at the long-term cycle of all of these, we're able to control that, and so that we can know how much we can finance, how much we can perform projects at without asking for additional taxpayer dollars. So, stepping back and taking kind of a big picture look at, well, what really goes in from the beginning to the end of planning projects. This is the part that we engaged in through the fall and winter and actually into the spring of this past school year. We had a couple presentations already. We've had the survey open. We prioritized over all those meetings I showed you in the beginning as we developed our scope and then came out with the overall project as I just presented to you tonight. And then we move into what's called the SEEKR process. SEEKR stands for the State Environmental Quality Review Act, but shortened to SEEKR, the State Environmental Quality Review. And there are various parts to that, primarily led by our engineers who we contract with, who are also double as landscape architects. So as part one of that process, we send out notification of the proposed scope to a number of different governmental agencies. And they come back and give the board for consideration their feedback and their authority back to the district to serve as what's called the lead agency. And at this point, those have gone out to the New York State Education Department, the town of Delhi, the New York State Parks and Recreation Historic Preservation, the New York State DEC, and the New York City DEP. All those letters have come back already, authorizing us to move forward. So the next step is that the Board of Education will meet, we're actually meeting in a special meeting on August 17th to discuss the results of those as we move forward. And then, this is the other piece that I know people are anxious to hear about. How do we determine propositions on the ballot? So, again, no decisions have been made yet, but this is the next big decision that our board will be faced with. So this is really the decision, and we've heard from community members already. We want this to be a split proposition, we want it to be one proposition, so I want to explain what that means a little bit as you're hearing that. So in October, you have the voting ballot. A capital project, it's up to the district to determine how you want that broken down on the overall ballot. So options here are, you can include everything that I just shared with you in one proposition, and you vote on one thing. Or you can divide that up into multiple propositions. Sometimes a district might divide up into multiple propositions if one part of the project they need more tax money for, instead in one part of the project they don't. That's not the case here. We have developed the entire capital project to be at zero impact regardless. Other people have implored us to consider breaking up that proposition because of our history here with the community response to proposal for the athletic fields. That's no secret. So that has been with some of the advocacy behind the proposition in both ways. So either way, nothing has been predetermined. There's no intention on the part of the district to try to sneak anything by anybody or to force the voters to vote in one particular way over another. It's just these are the choices. We brought in representatives from schoolhouse construction, there are construction managers, and from fiscal advisors to meet with the board a few meetings ago to talk to them a little bit about why you would want to go one way or the other in determining propositions on the ballot. The board will be having a discussion about this again at a special board meeting on August 17th. The next regular board meeting on the 21st is when the board will vote on how that will appear on the ballot. So either way, the total budget would be $14 million. The board has already indicated that we can support this budget at 0% new impact to taxpayers without exceeding $14 million. If it's divided up into proposition, each one of these, I guess, mini projects, if you will, would have its own separate approved budget, the total of which would be $14 million. If it's in one, then again, you have a total of the $14 million. The only caveat there is the more you divide up the propositions, the more restrictive becomes your ability to shift funds within that project. So let me explain what that means. So let's use option one for the example. If you have a proposition, if that's divided up into two different propositions, in project A, you may have everything except for the athletic fields. And I'm using that as an example because I know that's what people are wondering about, and that's okay to talk about it. So everything that would be included in that would be under one proposition. Let's say roughly that would represent 10 of that $14 million. We know within that we have the technology innovation space, we have the lighting in here, we have some infrastructure kind of things. And then what happens after the vote goes through is we go to bid day. And we put out for public bid all of the work that has to be done. And all the contractors come in and bid on what they can do, the things within that project for. So between now and then, things change. Cost of employees changes. The ability to secure materials changes. So that's a little bit of a moving target. But the bottom line is that if something comes out higher on one part of the project, but lower in another part, you can shift funds because the voters have approved you to spend that money, but only on what's in that proposition. You cannot shift funds between the two propositions. So project B, where the athletic fields, you couldn't take funds from the everything else to shift the athletic fields or vice versa. When everything's in one, then you have the ability to do that. Is that a reason for or for not? That will be up to our board to determine. But that's really what it really comes down to is the bottom line. Again, when they're split, voters approve those both separately. When it's together, they approve it as one total project. And there's those dates again where those decisions and discussions will be made. So then after the vote goes through in October, before that, at that August 21st meeting, the board will set the October date for the vote and how those votes will appear on the proposition. And then that starts that 45-day notice. At the beginning of the presentation, I said legally you only need to give 45 days notice. That's when that clock starts. So August 21st, it'll take us to sometime in October where we'll establish that vote date. Then following that, whatever is passed goes back to state ed for preparation for those final plans. We submit to the Office of Facilities Planning and then move on with bids, of course, and construction. So that's a little bit about the overall scope here. So, again, I know I went through it a little bit quickly, but this is being recorded and will be on our website for viewing again at a later date. As a matter of fact, all of the presentations so far that we've given on this are currently on our website under the Capital Improvement Projects tab. So again, next steps, we will have Appel Osborne. They are landscape architects and engineering firms. They will be with us to consult with the board at that special meeting on August 17th. And then at the meeting on August 21st, of course, is when the board issues a call for vote, which establishes the date, establishes those propositions, and makes that determination on the secret process. Now it's your turn. So at this point, I will open the floor to questions, comments, anything that you'd like the district to consider as we develop that FAQ document and as we move forward in our planning. Both of those microphones should be turned on. If they're not, there's a little button on the bottom that you press. But at this point, anyone is welcome to come up and share their thoughts. I will be up here jotting down notes to share back with our Board of Education.
Hello.
You're on, Reagan.
Thank you. My name is Reagan Reed. I'm a parent of twins going into the 4th grade, and I own the cardio club in Delaware. As I've expressed many, probably too many times, I am not in favor of the artificial turf field, but that's not why I'm here tonight. I'm here tonight to ask of the board, who I don't see all of the board members, which I was surprised about.
This is not an official
I know,
meeting,
but
so.
I mean, as a community member, that is surprising. I'm just pointing that out. Because I think it is important to hear from the community, and this is the open forum where we get to voice our opinions. We aren't even able to be addressed or at the board meetings regularly, so it would have been nice if the board members would have been here tonight. But I just want to say that, as we've expressed multiple times, we just are asking for the turf field to be separated from the technology lab and the auditorium upgrades, being that we are all in agreement that those are really desperately needed for our school. As somebody who runs dance recitals here, I can tell you, and as you can hear, the sound here is not excellent, the lighting is very antiquated, there isn't a lot I can do. I can't even plug in my iPhone to the equipment back there to play the music. I need Wi-Fi, which is very risky to play music during a show. So, coming from a parent, I'm just concerned that nothing is gonna pass if the turf is with the other, the technology lab and the auditorium upgrades. And I'm just still kind of confused why, when it's so controversial and it's already been voted down, we wouldn't just give the community a chance to decide. I'm not saying that, for the people I've spoken to, yes, they're in agreement with me, they're not in favor of the artificial turf, but that's not everyone. I'm just asking for an opportunity to give voters a chance to decide what they want. And if you put them in separate propositions, then people can say yes to artificial turf if they want, or no to artificial turf. But we all know that we need the agricultural technology lab and the auditorium upgrade, so I don't know why we would risk it. And a question I have is, what happens if you put them all together and then it gets voted down? Then, like, what is the process after that?
All right, thank you. If that happens, then the board has two choices. They can either redesign and then put that up again for a different vote, the redesigned project, or they can not. It really comes down to those two options.
So, I just am not clear, like, knowing we need the technology lab, knowing we need the upgrades, and you've said that yourself in previous meetings, why would we chance it to put it together with the other things? Because you don't feel confident that we could price out the cost for the artificial turf and then we may need to move money?
No, it's not a question of chance. It's a question of, whenever our board, I take my job very seriously in informing our board of what are your options. That's nothing more than that. I try not to lead our board into any situation where there are options that I neglected to explain to them. So this is, as you enter capital projects, and every superintendent will come in and have a different background in leading capital projects. I just choose to open things so that our board understands what all the decisions are. There's no, as I mentioned before, it's not a matter of trust, it's not a matter of trying to persuade anybody. Those are options that our board has. And without understanding what their full menu of options could be, then I wouldn't be doing my job and advising them.
I just don't understand why you or the board would be in favor of putting them together.
Nobody has garnered any decision yet. Have I asked the board and asked them in open session to start talking about what you're thinking and what you're feeling? Absolutely, because they are stewards of this district and our community should know where our board stands and what their personal thoughts are. At the end, they work as a unit. But if that is being interpreted as, not going in a particular direction or not understanding that, I'm sorry for that. However, they, again, have not made that decision. These are options, and that's where they currently stand.
Okay, I'm just saying that I don't even understand why it would be consideration, being that it is so controversial, so I hope that the board will take that in consideration, and since I only see Sean here, hopefully, oh, thank you. I hope that you guys will pass it on to the other board members, because there are several other board members, and isn't it, and maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that it was the job of the board to represent the community. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so when the community is speaking out so clearly, I'm just confused why it would still even be an option. And I still don't feel I've gotten that answer for why it would be put together. What would be one single reason you would put it together as our superintendent?
I've been given a set of concerns and a set of options and asked to develop a project that serves to resolve those. Based on my research, both with consideration for the history here, this is where I've landed, and that's, well, I should say we've landed, and this is what's being proposed. So it is not going to please everybody. It is not our job to please everybody. It's our job to take a problem, propose a solution, still with consideration for safety and security of our students certainly, still aligned with our vision and our mission. And this is the proposal as it currently stands.
But can you see any reason to put them together?
That is really up to our board.
I'm asking you though, as a superintendent.
Do I see a reason to put them together?
Yes, because you're the leader of our school.
I do. I could stand up here, Reagan, and give you reasons. I'm not going to give my personal opinion because this is not my personal decision, if that's what you're pushing for. However,
I could
give
one reason.
I could give reasons for putting them together and reasons for separating them. A reason for putting them together, as I just presented to everybody, would be to have the flexibility within the project if that's something that people are seeking to be able to have to do.
It just
That's
feels
the
like,
reason.
as a community member, from hearing stuff from, we're in a small town, people are talking, people speak to their friends who are on the board, hear what things are happening in executive session, and it just feels like the decision has been maybe not made, but it's close, and that I'm just confused why it is when there are so many people speaking out. And like I said, you are not gonna please everyone, but the opportunity is here for you to please most, because splitting it gives everybody a choice.
Well, just a couple things, and then I just want to give other people an opportunity to
That's
talk. Number one, I'm concerned if you're hearing things in executive session. Things that are in executive
We
session.
live in a small
content.
town, you're always gonna hear things.
Regardless.
Yes.
That presents a huge concern for me. The other piece, I've just forgotten. But again, if you come back to the small town, talk and discussion and what everyone perceives to want, that's hard for me to tell because it's usually the same small group of people who come to these kind of meetings.
Well, maybe Jesse can
And
lead
so-
us to the next, because we have 242 signatures asking to split it up.
Okay, well, that certainly will be taken into consideration.
So, is that here, let's see, I brought you,
Hold on, Jesse, I have a gentleman right here.
oh, I'm sorry. Oh, hey there.
Is it on now?
There's a button right on the bottom.
Oh, yeah. Audio.
Yeah, hold it. You know what, I'm gonna ask you to stand right over there where Reagan was, if you don't mind, thank you.
Things like that happen all the time when we're teaching. First of all, I want to say that I do agree with Reagan. To me, this is deja vu. We've been here before, we're here again now. What I'd like to ask, and maybe you can tell me where I can find these sorts of figures, is how many students are in FFA that are interested in agriculture? And what are you talking about when you're talking about upgrading the agricultural lab? And the same goes for technology. It's such a wide term. What do you mean by that? I understand woodworking lab and metalworking lab, but what else are we talking about? How many is this lab, is this going to be like an elective that only some students are going to take? How many students are going to take advantage of it? How many students are on the various athletic teams? Where do we find out these sorts of numbers and this sort of data? Because it might help us make some decisions here. And why do you think that this artificial turf field will help draw more people to our district? I like the idea of the technology lab of agriculture. I certainly like the things that you were saying about allowing not only students after school to come up and use these fields, but also the rest of us in the community, including those who are homeschooling their kids. So there's a lot of these things that I think need to be addressed so that we understand better what we're going to be voting for in October. Thank you.
Thank you. I've jotted a bunch of that down to include in our FAQ document because that certainly paints a clearer picture. Thank you for your input.
I just want to give you a copy of this survey and also a report here that I had that I was hoping to share with the whole board, but they're not all here, so I'll just give you one copy. Okay, so based on sort of, I think I had something totally different in mind to talk about, but I think in lieu of, or in mind of what Reagan had to say, I'd like to elaborate on that a little bit. Is this really echoey for everyone? Can you hear me okay? Okay, so in my opinion, and you know my opinion because I haven't been quiet about it, I had mentioned and I thought that there was pressure on the board and that there was a decision already sort of decided that was an undercurrent for this project in general. I mentioned that the very first time I came to speak at the forum. And my opinion is the same. I listen to or attend every board meeting, and so I see what happens, and I do have a very good mind for sort of the undercurrent of why things are happening and how. And I pulled some things out of some board meetings to bring up here today. So, let's see, I want to talk about April 17th, 2023. This was a special Board of Education meeting in public forum. And I'm going to quote you, Kelly, 28 minutes in, you said, "This is different. We're still talking about synthetic turf. I'm not going to hide that on the Dave Kelly field. Specifically, it's not the same scale as what was proposed last time. It's really addressing our current global set of needs and is focusing on necessity and long-term viability of our programs that we have." What specifically are you talking about? Right now, we're talking about a multi-purpose synthetic field. So that is the first time that I heard that term, multi-purpose synthetic field, with lights just on the upper field. This does not completely divorce us from our reliance on the Legion. My job is not to convince any of you which way to vote. My job is to give you information to inform you to make the best decision that you can for the future of our district and for your kids. I suppose virgin rubber and safe turf is an addition to this proposal because it was not discussed in that meeting. Most community members who spoke asked for the proposition to be split. To quote Jeff Ferrara, "I believe at this time in juncture, we run about 10 hours a week on Dave Kelly Field. We do some preventative maintenance. We don't do all that's recommended. It becomes more of a financial constraint to maintain perfect grass that can hold that 24 hours a week of trashing." He admitted that the maintenance recommended was not being followed. Don Morales was here, board member of Turf Grass Association and a longtime turf grass professor at SUNY Delaware. Turf is not a silver bullet. Some of these studies are sponsored by the turf industry. Warranties are of concern. They often limit usage to 250 events per year. Morales says the natural turf fields are very resilient. Practicing on artificial turf, holding a lot of events will cause the turf to wear faster and need to be replaced sooner. The maintenance of the natural turf field and the fields of the Legion would be less expensive than building and maintaining a turf field over time. The DEC and the EPA considers chrome rubber hazardous waste. Now, obviously, you said you're looking at a different product. As far as I'm aware, and that's what that study that I gave you is, there's no such thing as safe, environmentally friendly artificial turf. And that information that I gave you is the test results and the community board correspondence with the woman who had this test done to find out She tested before the artificial turf was put in and after. Mind you, this is one who says it doesn't have PFAs. And it turned out they didn't have PFAs before the turf and they did after. So I would be very leery of believing anything like that. And the PFAs are one thing, but is it zinc-free? Because it's the zinc that runs into the water. And it's a danger to the wildlife in a body of water like the Delaware River. Let's see here. Okay, on April 24th, 2023, the board had a discussion about a long-term plan. Ms. Zimmerman, you said it wouldn't move us forward with the current project to keep us on the same timeline to seek numbers. And that is in referral to the overall sports complex that we would love to see on campus one day. Many board members spoke about people saying they wanted, about what people had said, saying they wanted separate propositions. And you set a date to vote on the scope. Lauren and Lucy both asked about runoff, which, did you come up with some answers on runoff from the turf fields? Or?
You're asking about a meeting that was 2 months ago, and my purpose tonight was not to review all of the past meetings.
Well, that's my purpose here tonight.
Recorded.
I have a
And
reason for doing it.
I understand that,
Okay,
but
can I I just take that as a no, that you
no,
didn't
Jessica
look at
asked
the
me a
runoff?
question.
Yeah, I just wanted to know.
Finish. No, I'm not gonna stand up here and allow you to illustrate whether I've done my job or not. So
I'm sure you're doing your job, I'm just,
if that's the intention, that's really not the purpose.
my intention is to show that you have this entire time been trying to push your agenda with the turf being on only one proposition.
So I'm going to.
It's in the words from the meetings.
I'm gonna ask you to refrain from the term push my agenda. This has never been about my personal agenda. My agenda is to serve the students of this district and the families of this district and nothing else.
Okay. Well, in continuance, let's see here. So this is Lucy Kelly. The capital project that did go down, Sue Temple was running to get more ballots out because, it was like 500 people. There was the most number we've ever had. Nobody anticipated it. And I just want to get a better sense of what the community thinks. And then you went on to say, in my former district, we went on the road. So we kind of just went out and really tried to provide information, answer questions as best as possible, to address just questions and concerns that will continue to come up right until October. And I have every intention to go engage out in the community, not just to expect our community to come up here, but you actually get out. We have our farmers market in the summer where we had a DA tent to answer questions about COVID. I see another opportunity now to answer questions related to this project. So my point is that people were acting like they were worried that this wouldn't pass in one proposition, and your answer was, I will convince people. So that's what it appears to me from the
So give me an opportunity to clarify what that, and I think it's simply that's what it appears to you. When I started that slide, when we went back to the beginning of October, was to illustrate that we are making many, many efforts to reach our community and to be there just to answer questions. So yeah, absolutely. Have we been sitting at the farmer's market every Wednesday this summer? Absolutely. Have people come up and ask questions? Absolutely. That's nothing more than my intent to not hide up here on the hill, but to get down into our community where there's greater opportunity to engage in discussions. It is not to convince anybody one way or the other. Julie?
Well, I would also say that you have been engaging with the community since you started here. Years ago, when we had to engage the community about what was going on with COVID, what was going on with anything up here. It has nothing to do with us being down there because of this building project. You have been in the community since you started here, and it didn't have anything to do with the building project at that time.
Well, I will just conclude what I have to say with this. In listening to the meetings, whenever any of your board members brought up anything about looking into what it would be like to have something on campus, or what if we did something different, and your response was easy to read, and that was, we're not talking about that, we're talking about this. This is the current project. And so in my opinion, and from what I've heard, it certainly sounds as though you do have a preference to which way the proposition goes. And you didn't have a real great answer to Reagan when she asked you what is one good reason, other than being able to take money from the other project to afford it. And so what I see is that that is what you want, and the only reason that I can understand why you would be so adamant in having, and be so unwilling to just split the crops. Why not just split them? I mean, Kim said in one of the last meetings that she wants everybody to vote how they want. I don't care how people vote. Well, exactly. Why do you care how people vote? Let them have a choice.
Thank you for your opinion as to my intentions. I'm not gonna stand up here and try to convince anybody what my intentions are. I think my behaviors speak louder than that. And I'm disappointed if that is even one person's perception in the district.
It's more than one person, Kelly.
Well-
And if you would just split the crops, then everybody would be happy.
Thank you.
How does that?
The props is not my decision, it's a decision of the board.
But you hold a lot of weight on the board, and you could certainly, I think many of
I've
the board
never
members are
opposed
already
having on
there.
this board, nor will I continue to do them. I give the board the information they need to make an informed decision, and nothing more. So, thank you.
Okay.
Other comments?
I hope that all of you will listen to the meetings and make your own choice.
You mentioned the petition real quick.
And we have 252 signatures on the petition asking for the propositions to be split so that everyone gets a choice in this matter.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Ferrer. I'm the sports coordinator. I spend 60 hours a week doing sports here. To answer one question from earlier, I can't give percentages on the number of students that do FFA or various activities here. I can tell you 78% of our student body, grades 7 through 12, participated in athletics this past calendar year. To answer about Mrs. Zimmerman and her correspondence with me about the athletic fields, it has never been a self-serving endeavor. The questions she asks me are in relation to how does this benefit our student body? Are our coaches in favor? Does this benefit our students? Does this benefit our coaches? Are we seeking insight from all parties involved or who would be involved in the use of the athletic fields? It's not a unilateral decision. She takes into account what everybody thinks and wants and desires. To speak from my perspective, and only my perspective, on why we would or wouldn't have two propositions, again, not my decision, Mrs. Zimmerman has expressed whose decision that is, but we look at the district and we look at what's antiquated. And as Reagan said, our lighting and sound system in here is antiquated, and therefore we would want to address it. Our technology wing is antiquated, and therefore we would want to address it. Looking regionally at our athletic fields and how they compare to schools regionally, our athletic fields are antiquated. They're aging, and they're not the same fields they were 25 years ago. As more and more of our surrounding districts in our region go to turf fields, there will be more turf fields. There currently is more athletic, artificial turf fields in Section 4, which is the section we compete in, than there are natural grass fields, at least for the primary facility on each campus. So I would think as we address things that are antiquated, be it technology, lighting, and or athletic fields, if it's antiquated, it's antiquated. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Hello. Yeah, anyway, I'll just make a few quick comments, and I do want to start by giving strong support to a lot of the projects, particularly the design, agricultural, technology project. As many of you probably know, as a teacher of architecture, those things are important, and I think they're highly valuable in education. So I support that. I believe in the arts and upgrades and all these things, and just generally supporting education. So it's all good there. I will say, and I've said this before, I'm not a huge fan of artificial turf. I prefer not to have one. I will say though, sort of on the contrary, I do think that Delaware Academy has done a good job of doing community outreach from my perspective. We're not gonna please everyone. Like if it's artificial turf, maybe I'm not pleased, but I will take, I think Kelly and you and the board at least have been setting meetings, listening and being around. I appreciate that. And I see some movement towards it and that compromise from our comments, and I hope that that can be pushed further. So I do I think it is an improvement to have virgin rubber and, make that compromise, and that goes a long way, at least for me, and some of my concerns, not all of them, but some of them at least. I'm glad to see that there's still consideration of separating the votes out between the two. Again, I think that's showing a willingness to listen to us and all of those things, and so I would just encourage the continuation of that as that vote moves forward for separating out. So those are my thoughts that I just want to share. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Is it on? Is it on? Hi. Look. I can just speak. How's this? Whoa. Okay, hi, my name is Matt Van Buren. I was asked to read a letter from Lauren Raven, who can't be here tonight, and I think it's worth just saying one thing real quick about my point of view, so no one gets confused. I'm mostly a spectator on these things. I get my information from just, browsing Facebook posts that I see and conversations that I have privately. So I want to make sure from the people here who are peers of mine that this isn't necessarily for me. I didn't know what the letter said, or it wasn't even really written before I agreed to read it, but I'm happy to read it. I have a lot of respect for Lauren, and anyway, I'll just read what I have. It's not long. She starts out from me being the first person, interestingly. I'm reading this letter for Lauren Reba, who couldn't be here today. She attended Delaware Academy, is the mother of students at Delaware Academy, a local business owner, and a Board of Education member. And then she goes on to speak as if from her. My name is Lauren Reba, and I want to lend my support in its entirety to the capital project being proposed at DA. This is an exciting project that will allow our student body to excel in multiple areas. As a Board of Education member, I will let you know that this project has been carefully planned with a lot of thought and integrity. As a mother of two children who have played soccer their entire lives at DA, I would like to speak in support of the artificial multi-use turf field. When my daughter was in high school, she was lucky to have the one soccer game a season on the Dave Kelly field. Other sports, scheduling, and the weather always seemed to be a factor in playing time. At times, it seemed like girls soccer took a back seat to other sports. An artificial multi-use turf field would equalize playing time for girls and boys soccer, as well as football. Our girls and boys deserve a season, they deserve equal playing time, and an artificial multi-use field would provide this. Our kids are playing on artificial fields in many road games. Most college campuses use artificial turf fields. A local analysis of districts with artificial turf fields show that 65% of schools have artificial multi-use fields. The Stat League, IAC League, and Math League have 48 fields, 31 of which are artificial multi-use turf fields. Local district examples that have artificial turf fields or have capital projects to build artificial turf fields are Sydney, Green, Bainbridge Guilford, Unitigo, and Oneonta. Artificial multi-use turf fields are now required by New York State to host soccer and football semifinal and championship games. It would be wonderful to host our championship games here at DA, and it would bring a whole new level of school pride to our school community. During my time at DA as a student, mother, and board member, Delaware has always taken a leadership role in the advancement of facilities, programming, and education on all levels. I hope that providing a top-level playing field to accompany a premier STEM science lab and audiovisual performance space is the goal of our entire community. These three items will maintain Delhi's stance as a leading district in our area. These three components will ensure that all students, regardless of gender or extracurricular activity preference, will have the best facilities available and prepare them for participation on the next level. I would love to see our community come together under the lights on an artificial, multi-use turf field that supports and fosters multiple teams. Thank you, DA, for taking the time to put together such an amazing project. You have my support and the support of my family. Thank you.
Got this one working, yeah, Cecil.
My name is Cecil Davis. I'm a father of 5. I've had 2 graduate through the school, and both have played soccer and football. I am also a volunteer football coach, so I'm familiar with the facilities at Legion. And about 3 years ago, we had a student athlete, about safety. This is about safety for student athletes. About 3 years ago, we had a young man, a senior. First day of practice, he got up and walked towards the station. He stepped in the hole and tore his knee. So the facilities at Legion also aren't, we can't depend on them as much as we used to because it's always a roller coaster every year. We can't use the bathrooms when we're down there. There's constant complaining from the gentleman that runs Legion. We have the opportunity to make this campus as much as we can so one place where all kids can play more. One of the concerns I've had when my kids were driving down to Legion is the safety of taking the car right down. We're here, they can come up here, walk to the fields, and everything's at one place. But that's one of the big things is our student athlete safety. That's my thoughts.
Hi everyone, I'm Sean Newman, a physical education teacher and coach here. This past spring, as a baseball coach, we got a couple of weeks there, we had a ton of rain, and because of all the rain, it was hard for us to get games in, and it was hard for us to get practice time in. A lot of times, all we could do was just hit in the outfield, or hit in like the batting cage we got down there. All we could do was hit because we weren't able to go on the field because of the conditions. And during that time, one of our games that's supposed to be here got moved to Sydney, and while that game was being played at Sydney, because of all the rain, they were still able to practice. They had 3 teams practicing on their, football field, all multi-purpose field. They had a modified baseball team, a modified softball team, and a JV baseball team were all practicing on those days while we weren't able to practice. So we, had a little disadvantage there. All those, Cindy was getting, one step up on us. because they were able to practice and we were not able to practice. You know, so just one little thing like that, you know, how many times, I can't tell you how many times that happened to us this year, but if that happens 4 times, you know, that's 4 practices that they get better and that the more reps that they get, you know, if we were able to have that here, we could go out there and practice and, you know, get a better practice in and just go out and hit. We can work on other fundamentals of the game that we don't usually get to work on, or we can't work on sometimes. So it would be a huge benefit to us, not just as a football or a soccer team, but for, you know, spring use instead, because there doesn't get a lot of use during spring. So our team should go out there and get a practice in. Also, our last game of the year, JV, we played at Sydney, you know, both, you know, baseball and softball playing in the fields, but their modified teams were getting a game in on the football field, on the multi-purpose field, where otherwise those teams weren't gonna get a game in. So just another use of the field to help you get games in, right? Because this is all about the kids. And I just want to say, I think all 3 should go through, because we are here for the kids.
Hi everybody, my name is Melissa Emilio. I'm a kindergarten teacher here, but I'm also the cross-country and track and field coach. So just a couple things for the artificial turf on the track and field side of things. We're actually going to put electric right down on the field. Right now, we run an extension cord from the little doghouse above the bleachers, and it runs down the grass hill, across the sidewalk. There are 2 poles that have been cemented into buckets, and one goes on the inside of the track just before the finish line, and the other goes on the other side on the infield. So that extension cord gets run up the pole. It goes across the top of the track where kids can't touch it or jump and smack it while they're running. And it goes down the second pole, also gets zip tied to a cable that goes between the 2 poles, and then we can plug our expensive timing system into that. So it's always a risk on my side that a spectator is going to trip over the cord, it's going to pull the electric out, and the 3,200 meter race that the kids are currently running, on their last lap, it gets pulled out and we have absolutely no timing on the kids. And that would be horrible to be a runner and not get your time. Could be your best time ever, could be a state qualifying time, could be a super standard that automatically sends you to states. So that's always on my mind, having electric on the inside of the turf. We wouldn't have to worry about that extension cord and the possibility of that timing getting run out. Also, the track would then be resurfaced. Our long and triple jump pits would be moved to the opposite side of the track. So that actually creates less congestion at the start and finish line area, which can make it safer for kids. You know, we always block off around the timing system so that nothing gets unplugged, nothing gets, you know, damaged. But having less students on that particular side of the track and pushing them onto the other side creates better safety. As far as the artificial turf on the infield goes, I don't coach indoor track, but this year I was training for a half marathon and I ran with the kids a lot. But majority of the time we were outside on the track pretty much all winter running. But the inside of the track, the grass field was also covered in snow. So I would believe that a turf field could be plowed where the kids from the indoor track team could then be using the inside of the turf instead of being in the hallways. So for our long and triple jumpers, you obviously can't jump in the sand in the winter, it's frozen solid, it's a huge safety concern. So they're practicing long and triple jump inside on the tile floors in our hallways, which is definitely not good for their knees, their shins, or their ankles. So that potential to be outside on a softer surface is definitely better for injuries. And then adding lights to the field can allow us to run bigger track meets, longer track meets. Currently, we start our home invitational at 3:30 with the idea that it has to be done by 7:30 before it gets dark. So that requires schools to get their students out of class early to get here, some of them drive over an hour. So they're leaving their school probably around 1:30, 2 o'clock, because you usually get to a track meet early, so you can check in for your events, get warmed up, because if the meet starts at 3:30, then you need to be ready to go at 3:30. So that would allow us to run longer meets, we can invite more schools, more competition for our kids, and we wouldn't have to worry about that time constraint of getting the meet done before it starts. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Matt Albright, and I'm currently the girls' varsity soccer coach. And I'm in favor of artificial turf. Synthetic surface. One of the main concerns that I have with not having that type of surface is long-time usability. More and more, we've been playing on DK Field, which has been awesome because it is the best facility our school has. The students from the last 3 years, the athletes have had the last 3 years, they have not played any games other than right out here. So they don't know, and the parents don't know what it was like when we were playing at the Legion. Cecil certainly does with his oldest daughter, and Lauren does with her daughter. But the current group, they have never experienced that down at the Legion. The conditions of the fields down there are uncontrollable. There used to be signs everywhere that said no walking with dogs, but that happens all the time. So we're constantly cleaning our equipment, we're constantly having people walk their dogs while we're practicing, and also letting their dogs do what nature allows them to do and then leave it there. So we also come in and there's things that we find there from community use over the weekends. It's just not a controllable space for us. Up here, the field is better, however, it was never designed to have anything other than football games on it. So the really good sod and turf and sand base is only the width of a football field. As we, soccer-wise, we play with a wider pitch, wider field, and longer. We have with the current configuration, we can't get as wide or as long as we would really like because of drainage issues that happens with the sod that is not there or the sand base that's not there on the outsides of the fields. Also, when we use it, if it's a rainy week, we really run the risk of ruining it for someone else later in the week, the more we use it. So whether it's August or November, the synthetic surface would have the same playability, whether it's pouring rain or snowing and hailing, which we have played soccer games in that, it's going to be the same playability. So just for uniformity and safety and being able to not ruin it for anyone else as we use it, that's why I'm in favor.
Ed McCarthy. I'm not sure if this is the right forum, but I'm just getting into this and I'm not really sure all the facts, and so I just want to know if I can ask a couple questions. I saw the 14 million on the budget there. Is that based on actual bid documents and drawings, or what is that based on?
As close as we can get at this point. So we don't have final bid documents because legally we cannot solicit those yet. But that is based on recommendations from our engineers, our architects who are in the field working in comparable projects as close as we can get to give us a preliminary scope.
Okay, so these aren't actually drawings or specs. They're basically engineering estimates, square footage, that type of stuff?
Yeah, we do have drawings that are a little closer to that. Right behind you is Jared Yando, our construction manager, who curates a lot of this for us, and will probably have a more informed response to that. If you wouldn't mind handing him the mic, you can take a crack at answering.
Let me just keep going.
Okay.
Okay, so the 14 million, if it goes over 14 million, it's gonna have an impact on taxes, was I getting that right?
It would, but we are not, our board has already charged us with not exceeding $14 million. And we cannot exceed anything that the voters approve in terms of a budget.
Okay, so this August, get put in one big budget, and we ultimately make plans and goes out to bid, and I'm just throwing it out there, it might go over $14 million. At that point, it gets to the point like, okay, what are we gonna change, what are we gonna cut, how are we gonna downsize this, how can we save money? Who at that point decides that, hey, you know what, instead of the virgin rubber, maybe we just go recycle the tires. Well, maybe we don't need that other technology thing or what have you. I guess what I'm getting at is it seems like we're just kind of getting to a thing of 14. We don't really know why we're at 14 except that, well, it goes more than 14, that's not good. But we really don't really seem to know what this stuff really costs, and then it sounds like we're gonna rely on some later date of somebody else deciding what's gonna be cut down and eliminated. Do I got that right? I mean, who's gonna really decide? Like right now, this is like a public forum. But at the end of the day, it's gonna be a couple guys in a room deciding like, okay, we're gonna cut this out, we gotta save money here, and they're the ones that are ultimately gonna decide what that $14 million is gonna be decided on. That's what I'm thinking. I could be wrong, but this might be a good time to take it from here.
No, those are great questions. I'm gonna let Jared take the first part of that.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jared Dano. I am a community member. We were selected Schoolhouse Construction. We're based out of Delaware, New York. We work with over 70 school districts throughout New York State, believe it or not, even though we're in Little Delaware as a company. We are all the way up through the capital region and up through northern New York, up to the northern Canadian border. I will say, and those are great questions to ask, it can be a very confusing process for community members on how we get to these levels. One thing I can commend Delaware Academy for is they brought a construction management firm in the early process, so we're not just standing by historical data from architects and engineers. We also have a third party, which is us in this process. As I said, we're currently working with many districts. That we're not working with 70 at this moment, by the way, just 70 different clients. So we have historical data from the last few years that we really used for this current estimate, and what we called it was a pre-referendum estimate, because that's what it is. We are estimating this project prior to the referendum passing. We're basing it on conceptual design. What we did is we walked the building with the engineers and the architects. We have some documents of some design. There are some portions of this project that were unfortunately had to be cut from other projects because of situations that were brought up. So we take all of that information, we compile it and try to get as close as can be. Right now, as you all know, the most volatile thing with anything is inflation, where is dollars going with projects. We are using conservative inflation numbers when we're putting together, because you have to realize all schools have to do this. They have to plan this far in advance. So we're planning for something that's going to happen in 2025, essentially. I don't think if you've noticed the timeline in previous presentations, once the referendum passes, the design team then has to go ahead to spend all the time in thoroughly designing this project. It then needs, after that time to do that, needs to go to the state education department. They need to have time to comment, and the architects and engineers to fix anything SED may point out needs to be adjusted. And then after that, it goes to a bid process. So it is a lengthy process from this moment on. It is, and it can be frustrating, and I understand that. But on the way there, we will be doing further estimates. So we have what's called a SD estimate, which is a schematic design. So that's approximately 20 or 30% design. So the design team's gonna have about 20 or 30% of the design complete, and we're gonna do an estimate then. That's gonna give us a check and balance. Okay, where are we? Are we going overboard, or do we need to hone back in? What do we need to do to get everything that we're looking at doing in this project? We'll then do a DD, design development estimate. That's at about 60 to 75% of it completed in design. And then we're gonna do another one once it goes to SED for approval. That's the full set that we plan on putting out to bid. So we call those also construction documents. Those are what will be put out to bid, to bidders. And we'll do another estimate then to see where we are. So how do we select what might get pulled? What do we do to avoid crashing over that 14 million and having to throw away the bids and go back to the drawing board, literally, and redesign things and have to go out to bid again? Because that's the circumstance. If you get bids that put you over $14 million, you literally cancel the project bids and you go and you redesign what you need to do and you go back to bid again. You don't have to go back to SED or anything like that because typically you're pulling things that have already been approved. So when we're doing these along the way, we're gonna work with probably what will be developed as a facilities committee group, the facilities director here, other people in the district that the district decides to choose to be on these committees to assist with this. And we're gonna pull things and we call them alternates. So we'll take things and we'll place them in an alternate category. And come bid day, those alternates, if the money allows, will be pulled back into the project. Now, there's a lot of components you don't see on this board that are things like boiler replacements and control upgrades and things like that. And we need to look at that perspective of what's wishes, what's wants, what's needed. The building condition survey that Kelly has alluded to a few times, that helps when the design teams have done those in the past. That tells us what needs to be done now, what's critical, what's can be stretched out and done in maybe a future project. So we would work with all of that documentation to be able to figure out what can and cannot go into the project. This is the way every district does this. It doesn't matter the company that's working for them, the CM agency, the design firm. These are the steps that are taking place and have to take place. Because unfortunately, this is a game of guessing. It's estimating. That's why we call it estimating. We don't know what it's going to be, the bid market is going to be in 2025. We just don't. The intention would be winter of 2025 to bid, January timeframe to bid, so we could hit the ground running in the springtime. So it is a process. It is difficult. I wish we could have that crystal ball that would tell us exactly what it's going to cost on bid day, but we don't. So this methodology that we've been using has been working well. We've had successful projects, successfully bid projects this year, even through the volatile market, because we've been able to use conservative inflation numbers, which we are doing for this project. We have to. But I just, as a community member, I've been part of the process since the beginning. I've been fortunate to do so. It's neat to have, inside, being inside on, my taxpayer dollars as well, and knowing that it's not going in a way that I think any community member would be upset about in the planning process. We're doing this in the way every district does it, and we're being as transparent as we can through this process.
We also, within that 14 million, we do take a very conservative approach to those estimates. We do build in certain escalators that are included called contingencies. We build in a little wiggle room for incidentals so that we do not go to the community with a cost that we know that we will likely exceed if we're not accounting for what within the market, what the typical escalators could be given the time frame. So there are a lot of checks and balances. We do have a subcommittee of our Board of Education. It's a capital project committee that we worked closely with through the last project that we just completed, through the most recent asbestos project that we just completed. So as things change, we're always also keeping the board informed of that as well. And then we turnkey that back to the regular board in public sessions. Jared, anything more on the contingencies and?
Yeah, I think one of the big factors, there's something called a design contingency, which I know there's some designers in this room and engineers, and we hold a larger percentage for that design team at the beginning of the project because there's things that haven't been fully investigated yet. Understandably, we haven't voted as a community to release the funds to pay these design teams to do all of their work yet. It wouldn't be advantageous to spend that money prior to a vote. You'd be wasting taxpayer dollars. You wait until the referendum passes, and then you use that funding to start the full-fledged, full-blown investigative designs that take a team of architects and engineers that come here and look into specific items in the building. So that percentage of design contingency is higher at the beginning of the game, and then it moves and reduces as you go, because as your design gets closer and closer, those percentages we spoke about, 25% to 50 to 60% design, we can reduce that design contingency. And that contingency is there to allow for, okay, we investigate a little more, we realized if we want to put that new mechanical unit on the roof, the engineer looked into it, we need more steel reinforcement in those joists that are up on the roof. So those are the kind of things that these contingencies are in place for those unknowns. So we do prepare for those.
So is there actually numbers, like an estimate that's been done?
Yes. Yes.
Publicly available?
It's been shared with the board, and yeah.
So there is like an estimate?
Correct. And it's conceptual based on, okay, replacement of boilers. And, we're using the concept of how many boilers and estimating the amount of piping that needs to be redone and pumps and things like that.
Yeah, and, Ed, certainly if you're interested in seeing that, if you want to make an appointment, come on up and we can talk through and explain where all of those come from, if that's something that you'd like to see further. But those are great questions, and I was just been jotting down some notes to include in the FAQ document, because other people who have not, been privy to some of the presentations will likely have the same questions, so thank you. Okay, I've been trying to do a little data gathering to answer some of your questions, sir. We have currently, I was texted with our FFA advisors. If I can read what I wrote here. FFA. We have over 40 students currently active in our FFA. I had the opportunity to go to the state convention with about 10 of them this year. It was held in Buffalo, New York, and watched Ellie Terrence, who was an officer at the state level and will continue to be, even though she graduated this year, finished third in the state in a very prestigious oratorical competition. So our FFA is doing amazing things. They were also invited this year to the New York State School Boards Association and the New York State World Schools Association annual conferences, where they demonstrated our entire maple syrup production that we have here on campus and gave away samples of their syrup and cotton candy. We do have a very active FFA. They will be showing in some way, shape, or form and participating in competitions at the Delaware County Fair next week. So they will be, donning their Delaware Academy FFA jackets. So that's definitely a growing field. Our high school principal, Crystal Trask, not Triskel, it's been a long day. Crystal also informed me that when we did a survey of our high school students, about 45% expressed interest in the technical areas, whether that be building trades, automotive, welding, or computer automated design, pre-engineering, pre-architecture, those types of interest areas. And we are now designing master schedules based on who we have in our current teaching staff, and we do have an open position for a full-time technology teacher, just a plug there, to get us closer to designing electives to meet those needs. Okay. And then back to the question, Jesse, that you had brought up regarding runoff, as I'm reflecting on that. I don't want anyone to think that I don't do my homework and I'm not responsive to questions that our board brings up. I write updates to our board every single week in response to as many questions as I can. It's not all retained, right off the top of my head. But that's also, I'm not a certified environmental engineer, so if I'm asked a question about runoff and the effects into the Delaware River, or the West Branch that is, I rely on our contracted engineers to research that for us. It's also part of the secret process. So we will get feedback from the DEP and from the DEC. They will consider a new number of different studies in helping us to determine what that impact is. I don't have the answer to that until we go through that process, but that is a piece that they will be consulting with them on. Barring no other questions, thank you for spending an hour and a half with us tonight. Thank you for supporting our schools in any way that you find appropriate. Just a reminder again, August 17th is a special board meeting. Special means it's not in our regular monthly meeting agendas. We can call special Board of Education meetings when we have a need to conduct board business outside of a regularly scheduled meeting. This is also a public meeting. And then August 21st. So our next two board meetings will be almost back to back, and those will be the next actions on this. Following board action on the 21st, of course, we'll start again that 45-day notice. We will be having one more forum prior to the vote. So thank you, have a great night.